The wrestling world just witnessed something that nobody saw coming, and honestly it might be one of the most shocking moments in recent WWE history, because Seth Rollins, the architect, the visionary, the man who has held the World Heavyweight Championship with an iron grip, just handed over his title to Roman Reigns. And if you think you know why this happened, you probably don't, because this story goes deeper than anyone expected. And before we dive into all the insane details of how this went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to stay updated on everything that happens next in this absolutely wild situation. Seth Rollins has been the fighting champion for months now, defending that World Heavyweight Championship against anyone and everyone who stepped up to challenge him, and he did it with a bad back with injuries that would have sidelined most wrestlers for months, but Seth kept going because that's who he is as a competitor and as a champion. But what happened on Monday Night Raw changed everything in ways that nobody could have predicted, because Seth Rollins walked out to that ring with the championship over his shoulder, and the look on his face told you that something was different, something was off. And when he got on the microphone, the entire arena went silent, because they could feel that whatever was about to happen was going to be huge. Seth started talking about his journey with the World Heavyweight Championship and how he poured everything he had into being the kind of champion that the WWE Universe deserved, and you could hear the emotion in his voice as he talked about all the battles, all the wars, all the nights where he pushed his body beyond its limits just to keep that title and prove that he was worthy of being called a champion. But then he said something that sent shockwaves through the crowd. He said that he couldn't do it anymore, that his body was telling him something that his heart didn't want to accept, and that he had to make a decision that went against everything he believed in as a fighter. The crowd was stunned, because nobody expected Seth Rollins to relinquish the title, and especially not in the way that he did it, because instead of just handing it over to a WWE official or leaving it in the ring, Seth Rollins called out Roman Reigns. And when Roman's music hit, the place absolutely erupted, because these two have history that runs deeper than almost any rivalry in modern WWE history, and seeing them in the ring together in this context felt surreal, because this wasn't about a match or a rivalry, this was about something entirely different. Roman Reigns walked down to the ring with that same confidence, that same presence that has made him the most dominant force in WWE for years now, and when he stepped through those ropes and stood face to face with Seth Rollins, you could cut the tension with a knife, because even though Seth was handing over the title, there was still that competitive fire in both of their eyes, and you knew that this moment was about more than just a championship changing hands. This was about respect, this was about legacy, and this was about two of the greatest wrestlers of this generation acknowledging each other in a way that they never really had before. Seth Rollins held up the World Heavyweight Championship one last time and looked at it with what can only be described as heartbreak in his eyes, because that title meant everything to him, and having to give it up not because he was beaten but because his body couldn't take anymore was clearly tearing him apart inside. And then he looked at Roman Reigns and said something that nobody expected. He said that if anyone was going to carry the weight of being a champion the way it deserved to be carried, it was Roman, and he extended the championship toward him. Roman Reigns took the title, but he didn't celebrate, he didn't gloat, he didn't do any of the things that you would expect from the tribal chief. Instead, he looked at Seth with something that almost looked like understanding and respect, and for a moment it seemed like all the years of battles and betrayals and wars between them just melted away, because in that moment they weren't enemies, they were two warriors who understood what it took to be at the top and what it cost to stay there. And Roman nodded at Seth in a way that said more than any words could have. But here's where things get really interesting, because the moment didn't end there, and it wasn't just a simple passing of the torch situation, because as soon as Roman had that title in his hands, the questions started flooding in from everywhere. And the biggest question was, why did Seth Rollins choose Roman Reigns specifically to give the title to, and why didn't he just vacate it and let WWE determine a new champion through a tournament or a match? And the answer to that question is what makes this whole situation so complex and so fascinating. Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns go back to the very beginning of their main roster runs as members of the Shield alongside Dean Ambrose, who's now Jon Moxley, and they dominated WWE together as a unit that was unstoppable. But then Seth turned on them in one of the most shocking betrayals in WWE history, and that betrayal set off a chain of events that defined all of their careers and created rivalries that lasted for years. And through all of that, through all the matches and the feuds and the moments where they genuinely seemed to hate each other, there was always this underlying thread of respect, because they knew each other better than almost anyone else in that locker room. When Seth handed that title to Roman, it was like he was acknowledging that Roman Reigns, despite everything, despite all their history, was the only person he trusted to carry the championship the way it needed to be carried. And that's a huge statement coming from someone like Seth Rollins, who has always been fiercely competitive and has always wanted to be the best, and for him to admit that Roman was the right person for this moment shows just how much respect exists between them even after everything they've been through. Now let's talk about what this means for Roman Reigns, because he already had the undisputed WWE Universal Championship for over 1,000 days in one of the most dominant title reigns in wrestling history, and even though he eventually lost the title to Cody Rhodes, he's been on this journey to reclaim his spot at the top of WWE, and now with the World Heavyweight Championship in his hands, Roman has a chance to cement his legacy even further and show that he's not just the tribal chief, he's the undisputed top guy in all of professional wrestling. The WWE Universe is divided on this whole situation, because some fans think that Seth should have been given more time to recover and come back to defend the title properly, and they feel like him relinquishing it robs them of the closure of seeing him lose it in a match, while other fans understand that injuries are real and that Seth made the right decision for his health and his future, and they respect him for being honest about his limitations instead of trying to push through and potentially ending his career permanently. But there's also a group of fans who are suspicious about the whole thing because in WWE nothing is ever as simple as it seems, and there are already theories floating around that this could be part of a much bigger storyline and that maybe Seth Rollins didn't just hand over the title out of respect. Maybe there's something else going on behind the scenes that we don't know about yet, and with WWE's history of swerves and unexpected twists, you can't really blame fans for being skeptical about taking this at face value. The locker room reaction has been fascinating too because other wrestlers have been weighing in on social media and in interviews about what they think of Seth's decision, and most of them have been supportive, saying that Seth did what he had to do and that there's no shame in putting your health first. But there are also a few wrestlers who have made it clear that they think they should have been given a shot at that title instead of it just being handed to Roman, and that's creating some tension. That could lead to some really interesting storylines in the coming weeks. One of the most intriguing aspects of this whole situation is what it means for the World Heavyweight Championship moving forward, because now that Roman has it, does that mean he's going to defend it on Raw, or is he going to take it to SmackDown? And if he does take it to SmackDown, what does that mean for the Raw roster, and does that mean there will need to be a new championship created for Raw, or will WWE go back to having one world champion across both brands like they did during the pandemic era? There's also the question of who's going to step up to challenge Roman for that title, because now that he has it, there's going to be a line of wrestlers who want their shot, and names like Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre and Gunther are already being mentioned as potential challengers, and each of those potential feuds would be absolutely incredible because they all have history with Roman in different ways and they all have legitimate claims to being #1 contenders. Seth Rollins himself has said that even though he's relinquishing the title now, that doesn't mean he's done with wrestling, and that once he's healthy he's coming back for what's his, and that sets up a potential future feud between Seth and Roman over this very championship. And honestly, that's a match that wrestling fans would lose their minds over because these two have incredible chemistry in the ring, and every time they face each other they deliver something special. The timing of all of this is also interesting because we're heading into the road to WrestleMania season, and WrestleMania is where the biggest stories culminate and the biggest matches happen, and you have to wonder if this whole situation with Seth handing the title to Roman is setting up something massive for WrestleMania, and if maybe, just maybe, we're going to see Seth Rollins return at the biggest show of the year to challenge Roman for the championship in what would be an absolutely epic encounter. What makes this moment even more significant is the way it was presented, because WWE could have just had Seth come out and cut a generic promo about having to relinquish the title due to injury, but instead they made it personal. They made it about the relationship between Seth and Roman, and they made it feel like a real moment with real emotion, and that's the kind of storytelling that gets people invested and makes them care about what happens next. Roman Reigns holding that World Heavyweight Championship also brings up interesting possibilities for the Bloodline, because even though the Bloodline has gone through changes and there have been fractures within the group, Roman is still the head of the table, and now with another World Championship in his possession that only strengthens his position and gives him more leverage over everyone else, and you have to wonder if this is going to lead to more conflict within the Bloodline or if it's going to bring them together in a new way. The social media reaction to this has been absolutely insane, with fans posting their thoughts and theories and creating memes and video packages about the moment, and it's clear that this is something that has captured people's attention in a major way, and that's what WWE wants, because moments like this are what create buzz and get people talking and keep them invested in the product. Some people are comparing this moment to other times in wrestling history when championships were relinquished or handed over in unusual ways, and there aren't a lot of examples that compare to this, because usually when a champion has to give up a title it's done backstage or through an announcement, but Seth did it in the ring in front of the fans, and he did it by giving it directly to another wrestler, which is extremely rare and makes this moment stand out even more. The question now is what happens next, because WWE has opened up a lot of potential storylines with this one moment, and the way they follow through on it is going to be crucial, and if they do it right this could be looked back on as one of the most important moments in recent WWE history. But if they drop the ball and don't capitalize on the intrigue and the emotion they created, then it's going to feel like a wasted opportunity. Seth Rollins has built his entire career on being resilient and finding ways to come back from adversity, and this is just another chapter in that story. And knowing Seth, he's not going to stay away for long, and when he does come back he's going to be hungrier and more determined than ever to reclaim what he sees as his, and that's the kind of storytelling that wrestling fans love, because it gives them something to look forward to and it gives them a reason to keep watching. Roman Reigns, on the other hand, is in a position now where he has to prove that he's worthy of being given this title in this way, and even though he's already one of the most accomplished wrestlers in WWE history, there are always going to be doubters and people who say that he didn't earn it the right way, and Roman thrives on proving people wrong, so you can bet that he's going to use that as motivation to have an incredible run with this championship. The World Heavyweight Championship itself has had an interesting journey since it was reintroduced, and having it around Roman's waist gives it a level of prestige and importance that it maybe hasn't had consistently since it was brought back, and if WWE books this correctly they can elevate the title to the same level as the undisputed WWE Championship and make it feel like winning it is one of the ultimate achievements in wrestling. This whole situation also raises questions about how WWE handles injuries and championships going forward, because Seth's injury situation has been well documented and he's been wrestling through pain for a long time, and maybe this is WWE's way of acknowledging that they need to do better about protecting their talent and not having them work through injuries that could have long-term consequences, and if that's the case then this could actually be a positive step forward for the company. The emotional weight of the moment when Seth handed over that title cannot be overstated, because you could see in his eyes and hear in his voice how much it hurt him to do that, and for a performer like Seth who puts everything into his character and his work, that vulnerability made the moment feel real and authentic, and those are the kinds of moments that fans remember forever. As we move forward from this moment, the WWE Universe is going to be watching closely to see what happens with both Seth and Roman, because this story is far from over, and in fact it feels like it's just beginning. And whether you loved the decision or hated it, you can't deny that it got people talking, and in the world of professional wrestling that's exactly what you want. So if you've made it this far, you clearly care about what's happening in WWE and you want to stay updated on all the latest developments, so make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss any updates on what happens next with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns and the World Heavyweight Championship, because this story is going to keep evolving and you're going to want to be here for every twist and turn that comes next.